Welcome. During Dr. King's Nobel Prize address, he stated, "There is nothing new about poverty. What is new, however, is that we have the resources to get rid of it." Hello, and happy MLK Day. My name is Tim Russell, Vice President of Community Engagement for WTTW, WFMT, and thank you for joining us this evening. Today, during Poverty Awareness Month, we launched Firsthand Living in Poverty, which is a continuation of WTTW's Firsthand multi-platform, multi-year initiative focusing on firsthand perspectives of people facing critical issues in Chicago. In Firsthand Living in Poverty, presented across WTTW's digital and social platforms and in the community, we meet 5 people experiencing intergenerational poverty and facing daily challenges that make their circumstances difficult to escape. Many of you joining us tonight may have just watched our special episode of Chicago Tonight devoted to poverty in Chicago. And our hope tonight is to continue the conversation and to preview and discuss the Firsthand Living in Poverty documentary series. After tonight, I hope you will visit the website at wttw.com/firsthand to watch and share the documentary series and 5 expert talks focusing on poverty in Chicago. Read reported stories, download the discussion guide, and learn about future events. I'd like to offer special thanks to our members and donors who make everything we do possible. It's because of your support that WTTW can produce and present content that tells the stories of our city and region and fulfills our purpose to enrich lives, engage communities, and inspire exploration. Lead support for Firsthand Living in Poverty is provided by the Granger Foundation and Becky and Lester Knight, the Knight Family Foundation. Major support is also provided by Jim and Kay Mabey, Randy and Carrie McMillan, Butler Family Foundation, and Denny and Sandy Cummings, along with other generous sponsors. Now, before we get our preview and conversation started, I would like to share a special introduction video from the Reverend Jesse L. Jackson Sr., who spent decades working on poverty in our city and beyond. Roll video.
But Dr. King said you should not be against people becoming millionaires if they earn it. You should be mindless, not be mindless, materialistic. The King said you should not, whenever we have black millionaires, we should be materialistically minded, but not mindless and materialistic. So if we have the ball players have money in football, basketball, baseball, the mother who need public education, need diapers, affordable care, does not deal with that at all. And so we often cast poor people in a bad light. Well, who digs the dishes? Where other people's children catch her in the bus? Poor people. And they're not black. Most poor people are not black, not brown. They're white, real and young. And they realize other people's children. Tragedy, racism is such in our own country that many poor white people fight against poverty programs, fighting against Medicaid for the poor, against the job and income for everybody. They call Barack put up affordable care. They turn against it, call it Obamacare. So if poor people were fighting for the end poverty, it would be a major step in the right direction. WTW is doing a great service. Focus on poverty. Poverty is the absence of access to resources, not ones willing to work. That's why I keep saying that you look at the food lines now, long lines, Cadillacs, latest cars, and people doing well, they have a job. They can pay their rent, pay their house notes, send children to school. No, they can't because they don't have economic resources. That's why we have a job and income for every American.
Thank you so much to Reverend Jackson for that introduction. And now I want to welcome all of our guests, Audra Wilson, the President and CEO of the Shriver Center on Poverty Law, Carmelo Barbaro, the Executive Director of the Poverty Lab at the University of Chicago, Ebony Scott, Partnership Director at the Family Independence Initiative, and Melissa Fonseca, who is one of the 5 people we featured in our documentary series, which you can watch at WTTW.com/firsthand. And while you're there, you can also watch talks delivered by Ebony and Audra. I, by the way, am Dan Protess, the executive producer of Firsthand Living in Poverty. Melissa, let's start with you. You bravely shared your story with us, but you said you're worried about people watching your story and judging you for spending money to make yourself look good, spending money on your kids. Is this something you've experienced, feeling like you're judged?
All the time. I feel like everybody's judged somehow, some way. I feel like now that I came out with my story, I'm going to be judged even more. 1, for, like I said, about my education. 2, a lot of people didn't even know I was shot. 3, me being at my job for so long, and I guess not either moving up or at the position I'm in. So that's like a few things that, weighs a little bit on me.
Well, again, I want to thank you for sharing your story. And I think this should help stimulate an important conversation about how we talk about people like you who are working minimum wage jobs and really serving all of us and serving society. Let's have a look now at the start of Melissa's story, which again, you can watch at WTTW.com/firsthand.
Every day is just about the same thing. Every day I get the same routine. You get up, you go to work, come home, you cook dinner, and go to bed and do the same thing. I'm working at Walgreens. I've been working at Walgreens for about 17 years now. I started off as a cashier, and now I'm a photo specialist there. When I first started at Walgreens, I was making $7.20 an hour. We got a raise like once a year. It could have been somewhere around a quarter to maybe 50 cents was the most.
How you doing today?
I am good. How you doing today?
Oh, trying to say cool. It's so hot outside.
It's hot out there. I am waiting.
Then after that, they raised the minimum wage up. It went up to like $13. After being there for over 10 years, I wasn't even at $13, so it was like a slap in all our face to know that, like, you've been there all these years and you're still making the same thing as people who just getting hired. It was tough. I'm not able to live off of minimum wage. I had times where I can literally get paid that morning, and by the afternoon, my whole check was gone. I would never want my kids to see the worries that I have. I'm not gonna have gas for the next couple days. I'm gonna have to make this gas that I do have there and stretch. I couldn't take my kids to McDonald's if they asked for it. I couldn't give them money to go to the book fair at school because I didn't have it. Because it was either going towards rent or a certain bill. I barely get by.
Oh, you want some of what? Oh, we don't need a shopping cart. Mommy's just gonna get a few things. Ooh, grab that one.
I would like to see a change of employment.
I got it.
But what else could I be doing with the education I have?
I need 2 more. There we go.
You can't get hired with just a high school diploma. I don't feel like I'm smart enough to go to school, but I feel like if I wanted something better than a minimum wage job, I have to get a higher education.
Oh, okay. What you gonna get? You gonna get candy or you want chips?
And it's like, how can you get it?
You gonna get one, Mike?
I get 2.
You can't try to work on yourself and also have a job and be a parent too. So it's like something's gonna have to be pushed to the side.
Thank you. Who's gonna help with the bag? Come on, let's go.
Melissa Ebony says that she's worried about being judged. This seems to be an indication of how we talk about poverty in America. And in fact, you say poverty is the result of failures by our system, but we tend to blame individuals who are living in poverty instead. Why is that?
Absolutely. I think Reverend Jackson, in his open remarks, when he talked about the negative light that we cast upon the poor, hit the nail on the head. And so much of it, regardless of how uncomfortable it is, but so much of it is rooted in racism and classism. And we have to start there. We have to start with an honest conversation about when we constructed these programs and approaches, who did we think we were solving for? And if you think you are solving for someone incapable of making a strong choice, if you think you are solving for someone who needs their hand held from A to Z, well, that's what you're going to design. And, the consequence of that we don't talk about is exactly what Melissa and so many other folks across this country experience, which is a loss of hope, which is a loss of the ability to dream and the loss of the ability to feel like you have agency. And it snowballs from there.
And Ebony, you are an advocate for basic income, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Audra, let's talk about the pandemic and the effect it's had on the economy. 8 million Americans slipped into poverty in the second half of last year. As people are vaccinated and the economy starts to rebound, will these people recover?
Well, that is the question. I mean, the fact of the matter is people like Melissa, and I'm appreciative that she's sharing her story, and so many others, they are essential workers. They are the workforce behind our workforce, and they're the backbone of American society. But yet too frequently, these are the individuals who make minimum wage, and federal minimum wage, by the way, is at $7.25, and it's been there since 2009. They frequently have to work more than one job to make ends meet. They often have no employer-based health insurance. They have no paid sick leave. They have very few vacation days. So these are people who are already living on the brink of poverty. Now you have the impact of the pandemic and the economic fallout, which is continuing until people get vaccinated and back to work. And the impact has been prevalent in Black, Latino, Indigenous, and immigrant households. And this just reflects, quite frankly, a lot of the harsh and longstanding inequities that come from structural racism in education, in employment, housing, healthcare. And so, unfortunately, a lot of these folks, even though they might be able to get back to work, they may be slightly worse off than they already are because they were on the brink to begin with.
Carmelo, you actually say that at the start of the pandemic, the poverty rate declined. Why is that?
Yeah, this was a really unexpected finding from some research conducted by a group of professors, including Bruce Meyer at the University of Chicago. But they found that during the months of April, May, and June, the poverty rate in the United States actually declined, despite the fact that the unemployment rate quadrupled over that time period. And the reason is that the stimulus payments and the unemployment insurance benefits passed under the CARES Act actually brought a group of people in our society who were working and living in poverty and actually left them better off, even though they were out of work. And those benefits ended over the course of the summer. And so, as a result, about 8 million Americans have slipped into poverty since June. But I think that really highlights the degree to which policy plays a really important role in who experiences poverty in the United States and who doesn't. I think some people looked at that finding and thought, oh, I think this means the programs are too generous. But I think another way to look at it is actually to say, why have we constructed a society where so many people are working but living in poverty? Maybe there's another way.
And so does this suggest that stimulus payments are good public policy, say compared to extension of unemployment benefits?
Well, I think that the stimulus payments and the unemployment benefits kind of accomplish different ends. I think that the unemployment benefits definitely had a huge impact on both reducing poverty rates for people who are experiencing unemployment, but also helping to stimulate the local economy. So I think part of the reason many have speculated that the economy did not do worse over the summer was that people who desperately needed money and were unemployed were able to continue paying bills and shopping locally during that time period.
Melissa, I want to come back to you. During the pandemic, you are what we now call an essential worker. And you say that customers at Walgreens often thank you for doing your job. How do you feel when you hear that?
I feel like it was a slap in the face, but maybe in their eyes, they think it was a compliment. I feel like we didn't have the option. I didn't have the option to work from home while everybody else was at home. And then at this time, I was like stressed because we had the virus and the looting at the same time. So I was like, I don't know what this virus is. I don't know how fast I can get it, or, you know, me touching or ringing somebody, can I get it? So it was a little, you know, much for me to handle. And then when they say that, I'm like, I didn't take it as a compliment at that time, but maybe looking back at it now, it probably was a compliment in their eyes. But in my eyes, I was just frustrated because I was one of them who had to come to work every day. I couldn't stay home and, you know, shield my kids from what's going on. Or when I got home, I had to take off everything. And I don't know if I should wash my hands or do I have to spray myself or spray my car. So at that point, I didn't take it as a compliment.
You weren't there for the benefit of your customers as much as you were there for the benefit of your family.
Right, because I felt like I had to work. If I didn't work, how am I going to be able to provide? Now, yes, I probably could have collected unemployment, but at the same time, it's like I didn't lose my job. I still had my job, but I didn't know at that time, like, did I have an option to stay at home? Can I still work? And I went to work not because I felt like I had to be there, but because I feel like even though I've been there so long, I look at my coworkers and my management as a part of my family. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I'm showing up to work for them because I know just as scared as I was, they were too.
Carmelo, Melissa's story is not unusual in a lot of ways. You say the majority of adults experiencing poverty in America are working. Why is that? Is the problem low wages or the high cost of living or both?
I think it's a combination of the two. So, you know, of individuals living in poverty who are able to work, about 63% are working. And I think it is a mix of things. You know, as Audra noted, the federal minimum wage has not been increased since 2009. And there is no county in the country where an adult working full-time at the minimum wage can afford a 2-bedroom apartment. So I think that, you know, wage policy is part of the story, but, you know, I think that the cost of living in the United States is also part of the story.
And housing costs in particular are a common burden among the working poor, even in a city like Chicago, where the cost of housing relative to the coasts, at least, is relatively inexpensive.
Yeah, about 50% of renters in Chicago are rent burdened, which means that they are spending more than 30% of their income on housing, which is sort of the threshold, you know, most policymakers consider as being affordable. So about half of renters in Chicago are spending more on housing than is advisable. And, you know, that crowds out other things that you might be doing, right? It's difficult to save money to start a small business if you're spending 40 or 50% of your income on housing. It's difficult to save for a child's college education. So a lot of the things that we, you know, we sort of tell ourselves people should do to escape poverty are really difficult to do when income and expenses are so out of whack.
So Ebony, this would suggest that housing assistance like vouchers, for instance, might be an effective tool?
You know, I think in many instances they are. The challenge is often the way in which the programs are managed and implemented. You know, our current approach to particularly federal housing vouchers they're really strict and restrictive. And you see so many examples where, you know, a family may work hard and that results in them triggering a benefits cliff, and now they lose their housing. You know, the other challenge with the way in which we approach housing assistance is with scattered site housing, right? And providing someone a voucher just for the home itself is really not enough, and it's insufficient. As someone who lives in a community with the Nextdoor app and the Ring doorbell, I see my neighbors all of the time saying really hateful, classist things about those in my community who have Section 8 vouchers. And how do they know who they are? Because they're the people who don't have the extra $250 for bright red mulch as soon as it's April. They're the people who don't have the extra $150 to sign up for the Tinley Park Bulldogs baseball team. So they don't know anyone in the neighborhood. And so, you know, we have to find a way to make these benefits more flexible. and to extend the bridge. So we certainly, when you alleviate the burden of the cost of housing, you certainly enable folks to do much more, but we have to look at the way housing assistance is administered. And the last thing I'll say is I think the city of Chicago did a really great job of testing and pushing themselves to think differently during the pandemic. They did direct to tenant housing assistance as opposed to direct to landlord. And they also didn't do down to the penny payments, right? They knew that they would be giving some folks more than the actual cost of their rent, but they also acknowledged that because of the pandemic, people were behind on other housing related costs. And so that degree of flexibility is actually exactly what we need to see from government-backed housing programs.
Audra, our series is about intergenerational poverty, as you know, among many families in places like the south and west sides of Chicago. Wealth isn't being generated and passed down across generations. Does this tie directly to housing discrimination and the history of housing discrimination in a place like Chicago?
Oh, I definitely think that it does. I mean, and you're also talking about, you're tapping into just institutions, systems that keep people impoverished. So, for example, even among families that had the ability to be able to purchase homes, they were victims of redlining. I remember when I was working in the south suburbs and just looking historically a lot of the communities there to see and to hear about the instances of racial redlining, and so automatically segregating those families, even those who might be able to afford someplace that would be a better place to live was a problem. And then obviously the ability to be able to pass wealth down. In my talk that I give, Unbuckling the Bootstraps, I even talk about the Homestead Act. So the series of acts that came out of this period of manifest destiny when families were given basically tracts of land that they could eventually live on so long as they had improved upon those. But these were primarily for white families. And you're talking about legacies, passing down land from generation to generation and using that as a basis to be able to build wealth. But many communities of color and families of color would like to be able to do the same thing. But if they're prevented from even being able to purchase homes in the first place, or paying exorbitant amounts of money and fees and interest rates, this makes it very, very difficult for them to even be able to maintain lands, let alone being able to pass this down from generation to generation.
And you give in your talk many such examples of programs that have given, in particular, white Americans a leg up. You talk about the GI Bill. You talk about the Homestead Act you just mentioned, not generally referred to as handouts.
No, and that's the problem. I mean, Reverend Jackson talked about it, and he was talking about people who are poor. Poverty transcends race and ethnicity. There are many, many people who are living in the United States right now who are living in poverty. However, you cannot ignore the vestiges of slavery and racial subjugation as to why certain groups of people continue to remain poor. They remain mired in this system that keeps them down. So yes, there is upward mobility possible in the United States, but you will notice a disproportionate amount of individuals who are still stuck in poverty are those who are of color, those who are indigenous. And that is because we have this legacy of racial subjugation, of structural racism and structural inequity. And if we don't address that, then every program we talk about that's meant to or designed to help alleviate poverty really will only go so far, because there's some much deeper rooted issues that we have to be able to address before we're able to lift everyone out of poverty.
By the way, for all of you watching at home, if you have questions for our panelists, you can press the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. I already see a few questions are rolling in, and we will get to them later in our hour. Ebony, you are a proponent of basic income, which I want to get to in a moment. But first, let's talk about the war on poverty and your views on the war on poverty. More than 50 years ago, of course, Lyndon Johnson declared this war, and it gave us many of the programs we still have today: food stamps, Medicaid, Head Start. But you've been critical of these programs. Why?
I think one of the challenges that I have with the war on poverty was really the way in which it was structured, right? It was structured in such a way that it positioned those who were not living in poverty, not being directly impacted. It positioned them as needing support from experts, right? And it really created systems where it took away choice. And so, classic example, with the modern approach to social services, a family will go in, sit down for a diagnostic in which a case manager assesses all of the things that are going wrong in their lives, right? It's not a very pleasant experience. It's not a meeting where someone says, you know, Sarah, tell me about your hopes and dreams and describe your kids to me. What are your goals? Instead, it's, this is how much you make or you don't make. This is how much you're earning or you're not earning. I'm going to give you $400 in food stamps. Goodbye. It never takes into account that that family may have another set of priorities and doesn't invest in them. And so anytime you take away agency from people, you know, I just think that your effort is designed to fail. And it's created these systems that in many ways have crippled communities of people, right? And you see generational poverty. You see so many examples of an asset being an affordable apartment being passed down from the grandmother to the mother to the grandchild, right? Because that's literally all you have. And so I think we have to address that the war was also constructed in a time where racism was real and rampant. And I could go on for much longer, but you know, I talk about it a little bit more in my talk, but I think that to me is the root of the issue that I take with it.
And your organization has made basic income payments to one of our documentary subjects. Her name is Patricia. Let's take a look now at an excerpt from Patricia's story.
My mom, she always dreamed of a house with a big yard for us to play in, and she got it.
I'm finna put the corn on. We finna put the corn on now.
It's definitely been a dream of mine. Owning a home is like the only thing I want. Like, since I was a kid. Me and my husband, Derek, and our kids, we're currently living in my mom's basement. Me and my husband, we was renting, and we just recently got a letter in the mail that the landlord wasn't paying the taxes on the building.
Lily, come get your daddy a water.
So we were forced, pretty much, we had 30 days to pack up and leave. We're ever so grateful for my mom, you know, for letting us stay here. But I want to be a homeowner. Me and my husband, Derek, we've been married going on 12 years. We have 3 kids. Our first is Derek Jr. He's 14, just went to high school, the sweetest boy. The second is Kenneth. He's 10. He just went to 5th grade. He's just went into that independent stage to where he want to do everything by himself.
Stop running, buddy.
The baby is the girl, Passion. She's 8. She's my little helper. She does everything around the house. She likes to cook, clean. You know, she check on us, check on our daddy, check on me.
Come on.
And I pretty much don't see her a lot because she's into TikTok.
Bingo, bingo. Mommy! We did my nails.
Let me see.
You got me this one.
I did.
Yes!
I know what you like, look here. Our original plan was to stay in the apartment that we was at and save until we had the money and until our credit was where it needed to be to get a home.
Y'all ready for me to whoop y'all in this game?
We're still working on getting our house, but we just gonna put that on hold and maybe just find us an apartment or a house to rent out.
When the tree fell, I'm gonna show you, the tree was here. And when the tree fell, it fell all the way. I had a big tree, and it fell this way.
When the tree fell, it broke all of this. It broke into pieces.
And then it knocked this whole garage out. That meant that now I have to decide whether I'm going to pay the whole light bill or partial, or get on a partial plan. Now I got to get on a plan because I don't have the money for emergency. See, I really never had emergency money. My daughter and I had got some money from FII, and we put it together and had him start on the fence.
FII stands for Family Independence Initiative. they give you a certain amount of funds to use towards your goals.
I gotta tell you about this here.
One of the things that my mom wants to get done is her kitchen.
What is
Okay,
what
about
the windows? Didn't you say something about the windows? I'm getting them.
She needed new floor, new cabinets, sink, everything.
Home Depot, we're gonna get the double sink.
The funds that FII give out, you do not have to pay it back. It's like a gift.
And then we're gonna get the new stove.
FII money help with rent. FII money help bring me back up to date with my car notes, with the kids schooling.
And it's water's leaking and we have...
You're gonna go through trials and tribulations while you live in this world. And you need help sometimes. And they was that organization that was like, we understand real life situations. They wanted to help people in our community that had goals, that it was hard or impossible to get along, you know, because of your credit, or because of the color of your skin, or because of your income, you know. FII was like, we're not looking at any of that. We looking at a person that has a dream and a goal, and we just want to help you fulfill it.
What kind of stuff have you done with your FII fund?
Oh my God, I have done so much. Well, my 3 goals when we first started was to fix my credit, to work towards buying a house, and to work towards my husband's truck. He has his own business. He didn't have a work truck. He had to rent trucks, and he had to pay like $45 to $50 a day.
Yeah.
So it was just like wasted money.
I was really struck when you told me when your husband's truck broke down, his options were only to rent at really high cost. It just made me think about like the high cost of being broke. Everything costs more.
Yes.
Everything costs more.
Wow. When we got our money, we set it in that account and we did not touch it until we got the rest of what we needed to get his truck.
Did you believe that the funds were really gonna come?
No. I believed that we was gonna have to do something for it. I didn't think that it was gonna be as easy as you said it was, without having to pay anything back. That's like unheard of.
Every day I still get asked, like, do you have your families go through like financial literacy or budgeting? And the answer is no. Like, well, how do you work with them to set goals? I'm like, we don't. They don't need our help to set goals. Like, you and your husband knew what you needed.
FII was like, you know better than anybody what you need. You need help. Here's the help. Do whatever it is you need to do.
It's just really important to us as an organization that we don't assume that people who might be struggling financially don't know what's best for them. Families are inherently strong and capable and smart, and you can trust them with resources. And that history has shown us that when you invest in people's initiatives, great things happen.
We've been told no so many times, and we've been told we're not good enough as far as credit or income. So it's like, after you hear that so many times, it's like you give up on your goals, you give up on your dreams, because you like, all I want to do is get a little wiggle room to really do what I want to do.
Ebony, tell us, where do the funds come from that FII disperses?
So in Patricia's case, she's part of an experiment we're doing with the city of Chicago. You know, one thing that I'll credit the city for, they're a little quiet about it, but they have been taking steps to really learn about, you know, the power of investing, and not just cash transfers, but also social capital. So we have a partnership with the city of Chicago where they provide us with a small grant. And then we also privately fundraise. Google was a huge sponsor of ours when we launched our work here in Chicago. And we've also been supported by the United Way, Chicago Community Trust, and really great individuals.
And is the ultimate goal with these pilot programs that the federal and local governments will see how well it's working and that they will implement basic income programs?
Our ultimate goal is that government and philanthropy will experiment with this work, learn from the data, and really implement what we call a strength-based approach. Our end game is not to see, you know, a bunch of universal basic income experiments all over the place, right? We're really aiming for something bigger than that. We need government and philanthropy to really understand the approach that they're taking to making decisions on behalf of families isn't working. We also need them to recognize that there's this other type of economy that's happening called social capital, right? And Patricia illustrates it over and over in her video. When she falls on hard times and has to move, it is a family member extending their home to her, right? The interesting thing is, had her mother been a recipient of a federal housing grant, she actually would have had to tell her daughter, no, I can't take you in because I'm not allowed to say who can stay in my home. And so, that's part of the issue. But you see her also throughout the series, you'll see her leaning on the folks in her church and community for support. And at FII, that's a big part of it too. We really want people to find ways to invest in that and to invest in the agency and the work that people are doing together in ways that make sense. We happen to demonstrate that by delivering cash transfers and promoting social capital, but we think through experimenting with us, there are a myriad of ways government and philanthropy can adjust their approach.
Melissa, you rely on traditional safety net programs, subsidized housing, subsidized childcare, which you in particular love your subsidized childcare and your provider in particular. How would you feel about instead getting these no strings attached basic income payments like Patricia is receiving?
You know what? That would be something that could probably be helpful for me. But I have never even heard of stuff like that. So that's what I'm saying. Like in my community, we have like resources to whatever it is that Ebony's, telling me about. I have never heard of before. And I do believe that it will help families. And if I had something like that, I can see myself benefiting from. But I am, also appreciative of the government helping me because I've been having them help me pay for childcare since I've been working at my job. And if I didn't have that, I don't know how I probably wouldn't have been able to keep a job because I know that would be another, bill basically out my pocket from my check.
Carmelo, I want to talk about another aspect of that last video we just saw. As we heard, Patricia's parents owned a home, but home ownership has been out of reach for Patricia and her husband, Derek. And this seems to speak to a larger trend, doesn't it, that upward mobility has declined in the past 50 years. Why is that?
Yeah, that is a really troubling long-term trend. So the proportion of children who earn more than their parents that has been declining steadily since the 1940s. It's about half what it was. So really the sort of narrative that we have that, America is a place where people kind of move up and that social mobility is possible is becoming less and less true. I think the reasons for that are complicated and highly debated. I think that many people would point to, the fact that union membership has been declining, right? And so companies keep getting bigger and bigger, but employees are sort of at a loss to negotiate with them for higher wages. I think the rising cost of healthcare, many economists would say, has also contributed to that because companies are moving money to pay for people's healthcare instead of giving people wage increases. So there are a lot of really big forces at play. I think also local decisions that are made around, housing construction and how much housing can be built and where it can be built, also sort of stifles the market and keeps prices high. And so all of these things sort of come together to stifle upward mobility and reduce home ownership rates.
And in that same time period, there have been productivity gains among American workers. Is that right?
Yeah. So, I mean, the issue is not that we aren't becoming a wealthier society. It's where the money is going. So per capita income in the United States has gone up, almost in a straight line since World War II. But, wages for the median worker have stayed basically flat for the last several decades. So, yeah, we are becoming a more productive society. We are becoming a wealthier society. It's how that wealth is being distributed that, has really changed over time.
Melissa, I want to show more of your documentary now. This is from the last segment of your story where we learned that you're now starting your own business. Let's have a look.
I always wanted to have a little boutique for just nothing but women's clothes and focus on the ladies sometimes, because sometimes we don't think about ourselves. And I never actually like put my all into it, and I've been thinking about it for I don't know how many years. So I was like, you know what, let me try to push myself and order a few things and see how this picks up. This is a large. I sell them on Facebook. I created a Facebook page. I sold about a good, I want to say 20 outfits. Sometimes I would take pictures of myself in certain things, because if they see it on you, they'll probably feel like, okay, if it looks good on her, then it's gonna look good on me. I just want to focus on clothes, because clothes make me feel good. When I put on something nice, I feel pretty. After I had my kids, I lost confidence in myself. The times that I did feel the happiest or feel the prettiest is if I had something new. I felt comfort in clothes. I feel like a different person when I put them on. I get a lot of compliments. I love compliments. I'm coming down. Okay. Ooh, they got lights now. I'm praying that this is a ticket out of Walgreens job, so I can just be like, I resign. Walk in. I resign. Little different. My mom loves the idea. She loves it, and she hopes that it takes off so that I can become a boutique owner.
Definitely want to try to get a website, but I mean, Facebook is good for now. Mm-hmm. But you also want to like work on getting, like I said, like your business structure, getting your federal tax ID. You're gonna have to charge them tax on the merchandise you sell them.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's important. You are right.
And that, of course, is your mom, who we hear from throughout the story. Actually, going back to this theme we were establishing earlier, your mom has a master's degree. She was able to go back to school and get a master's degree, but that has been challenging for you. So given your goals of a career and an education, what could be done to help you realize your dreams and your goals?
I feel like maybe they should have somebody in these colleges that can help people like me, or people in general who don't know the steps they need to take to either enroll. Like, don't tell us what we need to do. It would be better if they were there to help us, that would actually take their time and, you know, help us apply or help us get started. Not, okay, you have to go here and you have to set this and you have to go online and do this, because it discouraged me, because it gave me such a runaround and gave me a headache, because I really don't know where to start. I don't know, you know, what I need to do. So if they had somebody in the schools that can help people like me who can get our foot in the door, it would make me feel like, okay, this is something I can do, instead of it being discouraging. And then you'll be like, you know what, forget it. I don't want to do it, because it was too challenging for me to even get started.
And now you're starting your own business. And in fact, you told me you were putting your federal stimulus checks back into your business. Are you starting your own business in part because you've kind of given up on the idea that you'll ever get ahead by working for someone else?
Yeah. I kind of felt like at my age right now, I don't believe that it would happen career-wise. But I feel like if I became my own boss and I can bring my family to the table, and hopefully it takes off and we can probably have multiple places, then I feel like it would take me and my family out of poverty. Not just myself. I want to make sure everybody's covered, because my family is all we have. And if I win, they win.
Yeah, and you're getting a lot of notes of support from our various viewers.
Thank you, viewers. Thank you.
Such as, Melissa, you're beautiful. You've got this.
Thank you.
Let's see if we have any questions. Any questions from the viewers? I also, at some point here, want to get to, so we've already talked about some of the challenges with our traditional safety net programs that came out of the war on poverty. What would a new war on poverty look like? Audra, let's start with you.
So I think that we really have to have a very serious conversation about setting a specific national goal for cutting poverty. And with that, we need to have an investment agenda that addresses the needs of the 21st century America, the demands of against the demands of a global economy. So one of the things we need to talk about is raising minimum wage, but the federal minimum wage. We have to address the gender pay gap. We have to create better quality jobs. We have to invest in work and income supports. So when Melissa's talking about, for example, the ability to have childcare subsidy, that is such an important support, and in income supports in general, which are helping folks who are working at minimum wage. So we need investment in work and income supports that will cut poverty and expand economic opportunities, and also learn from local initiatives that work at the cutting edge of poverty reduction. So when Ebony's talking about her great work, that's a perfect example of that. And I think that when you are doing this, you're creating a strong economy where there are gains that can be more equitably shared. And that's also going to require a commitment to programs and policies that we know will work. And these are the ways that you're going to actually really meaningfully cut poverty. But that's what the new war, so to speak, actually has to be. And if we're not doing this with a kind of a very concentrated focus, then we're not going to get anywhere.
We have a question from viewer Devin Brown, and this is a good question for you, Carmelo, asking, did the tearing down of Chicago low-income high-rise apartments and the relocation of many of those residents into Section 8 housing located in various Chicago and suburban neighborhoods ultimately benefit most of the families who did relocate? Carmelo, you work at the Poverty Lab, which has done studies on these so-called move to opportunity experiments. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'm happy to share a little. So we did not work on the moving to opportunity experiments, but very familiar with this research, which was based on a study that HUD initiated in the early 1990s, where they ran an experiment similar to a medical trial, where they gave some folks who were selected by lottery a Section 8 voucher. Some folks a Section 8 voucher, and specifically required them to move to a low-income neighborhood. And then some folks did not receive a voucher. And over many, many years, researchers followed those individuals. And what they learned was that, individuals who were given a Section 8 voucher and moved to a low-poverty neighborhood, the adults in those households and the older children, didn't see sort of huge gains in terms of like their education or their income. There were some benefits to them in terms of their physical and mental health, but for the children living in those households, when they moved to a low poverty neighborhood, they saw gains in their income, they saw gains in their college enrollment. And so while I haven't seen research specifically on the redevelopment of Chicago's housing projects and how that impacted people in Chicago, I think that the moving to opportunity studies do teach us some really important lessons about how the kind of neighborhood that you're living in, and in particular that you're raising young children in, can have a real impact on their long-term outcomes.
Well, and then there's a debate to be had. Shouldn't we develop all Chicago neighborhoods so that people are able to prosper in place rather than having to leave their neighborhood in order to do well? Ebony, you yourself are something of a product of Move to Opportunity. You, as a young person, were given the opportunity to go to high school, I believe, on the North Shore. Mm-hmm. How did those opportunities change your life?
Yeah, I talk all the time about, the ability growing up at preschool choice, the ability to access a scholarship and attend a school on the North Shore, I think completely changed my trajectory in a lot of ways. One, it gave me access to people I didn't even know existed, right? And I got to see the way in which they navigated the world. And I got to see as a teenager how other teenagers engaged in self-advocacy. And, one of the things I was talking to you about was going to a school like Loyola Academy and seeing my classmates get a grade that they disagreed with and openly express that, prepared me to go to college and in freshman year be able to do that same thing and tell my Black classmates, oh, this is the beginning of the conversation. This actually doesn't have to be the end, because I learned back at Loyola that it actually is negotiable. And so having that type of agency and the ability to advocate for myself, though, made all the difference, right? Because it meant I felt more comfortable walking in rooms and like I belonged there, right? I did not feel, as much as I still deal with imposter syndrome as an adult, it did not feel as deep, right? When I was much younger. But I think you have to be cautious with efforts like that, right? Because what we don't want to do is strip away culture. And who I am as a Black woman in the community I come from absolutely matters. And I do think, to the point you raised, we have to get to a place where those same opportunities exist in our communities. And then we're making a choice if we want to go to something else, right? We can't have this separate but unequal situation that we still have today.
Another viewer, WN Middleton, wants to know the panel's thoughts on student loan forgiveness. Audra, do you want to weigh in on that? And would that be an important critical step to alleviating poverty in America, especially with so many college graduates just weighed down by so much debt?
I mean, I think it's one of many important steps. I mean, Melissa, for example, is talking about, the concern about, do I have the opportunity to be able to go back to school? And for a lot of people, the cost of more education, or it's cost prohibitive. I mean, they are very concerned about going back to school and will they be able to repay their loans? So any sort of forgiveness program or putting back into play a lot of those programs that people would be able to go to school, but then commit themselves to a certain type of work to have those loans forgiven. Programs like that, I think, can be of immeasurable help for people to improve their educational situation and not have to worry about how they're going to be able to repay.
And CJ O'Hara wants to talk about infrastructure improvement. We've heard there was a brief moment where there was possibly going to be a bipartisan effort toward rebuilding America's infrastructure. Would that employ enough people to help alleviate poverty in America? Carmelo?
I haven't seen estimates of the number of jobs that would create, and ultimately it depends on how much Congress chooses to spend on it. But I mean, I do think that those types of investments can have a huge stimulating effect on employment locally, and particularly if they're sort of targeted in the right way, they can be really helpful for getting people into a line of work where they can move on and continue working in construction occupations, which provides a path towards a family sustaining wage.
We have a question.
I just want to jump in really quick. I'm sorry, and say that, while it does create, efforts like that do create jobs, we have to continue to remind ourselves, what Audra mentioned, that it's not enough. Even job creation alone, doesn't address wealth stripping practices like Black people buying homes on the South Side, and a few months after they closed, the home being valued less than what they closed for, right? And it doesn't address all of the other systemic issues. It doesn't, if you get people into those jobs and they immediately earn too much to hold on to their child care benefits, well, eventually they're going to leave the job, right? Because they're not going to be able to keep up. And so I think as a country, we have to be really careful about having these conversations that just center around job creation, because we have a whole lot of other issues that are playing into the mix that are creating this sustained poverty that we have.
And I think as I'm looking at the questions from viewers and listening to you speak, Ebony, it seems like there are a lot of concerns about the private sector and what the role is of the private sector in helping to alleviate poverty, whether of employees like Melissa. Ebony, maybe you would talk about banks. Audra, you have any thoughts about corporate social responsibility and the role of the private sector?
Well, I know corporations now are starting to move more towards what they call corporate social justice. So instead of just, and I shouldn't say throwing money at a problem, I mean, certainly investments are important, but now starting to be much more strategic and actually using the power that they wield and the influence that they have on a much larger and broader basis to be able to impact change, and recognizing that's the way to be a good corporate citizen. So, for many years, it has been sort of project by project or initiative by initiative, which, by the way, is still very important. But understanding the power that they wield as corporate citizens and how they can now transform communities and transform neighborhoods and make some meaningful investments that can allow entire communities to be uplifted are things that I think corporations should be looking at. And I believe slowly but surely may be looking at, especially in this prolonged period of racial reckoning and awakening.
Ebony, you just mentioned wealth stripping. What role could the banks play? What role could large banks play in helping to alleviate poverty in a city like Chicago?
You know, first and foremost, I think banks can begin to lend on the west and the south side of Chicago. I mean, we could start there. There have been, everyone saw the reporting from the fall about the huge disparities. I think that's a huge element of it. When you look at the leadership and the board makeup of a lot of these banks, you continue to see boards that are not diverse. And we know that leads to all types of trickle down issues, right? It creates conditions where, you know, banks continue to lend when they do lending at higher rates to people of color, and depending upon those zip codes. And I think banks have to jump in and be really honest about that, and be better citizens themselves. And really, I would love to see if banks invest in people the same way the federal government invests in them when they're struggling, right? We do not question when the banks have an issue. We don't say, I'll give you this money, but you got to do 6 months at my program here, and you better be on time. We don't do that to the bank CEOs, and so perhaps they could begin to model the way that they're treated to average citizens.
We're just about out of time. Ebony, briefly, what would your new war on poverty look like?
You know, briefly, my new war on poverty would be one where the resources and benefits available to people are flexible. You know, I like to imagine more of a marketplace, right? Allowing people to come in and see a menu of options and then choosing the ones that work best for them, rather than it being dictated to them what the solutions are. And I do think that that's possible. I think that our war on poverty is one in which the federal government becomes much less restrictive and bureaucratic in the way that it funds local governments and institutions. A lot of nonprofits want to do great work, but they're so tied up with having to be in compliance with the grant dollars. And so we need to loosen that up so that the people who want to do this work can do it in the way that is community-centered and puts people first.
Ebony, Audra, Carmelo, and Melissa, thanks so much for joining us. And thanks as always to our members, funders, and partners for their support of this project. A reminder, you can watch the entire Firsthand Living in Poverty documentary series right now on the PBS app and at WTTW.com/firsthand, where you can also find expert talks by Audra and Ebony, among others, text journalism, a discussion guide, and more. And thanks to all of you at home for joining us this evening. Good night.